Late 2001, when the Taliban government was overthrown by the international forces, we were really hoped that the situation might change for the Afghan people with the establishment of rule of law, with respect to the women's right and gender equality in the all life aspects of Afghanistan. But unfortunately, the situation hasn't changed for the big proportion of the population, because women are still suffering from the domestic violence. Women are suffering still from the lack of security. Women are still being kidnapped, raped, and abducted by the illegal armed groups. So how the situation, we can say that it has been changed. The attention and focuses have gone to the security, to the poppy eradication. They were paying much more attention on those areas, and actually they forgot about another case, which is the women, half of the population of Afghanistan.
At Faizabad Hospital in Afghanistan's northeastern province of Badakhshan, staff at the maternity unit swing into action for an all-too-familiar case. 25-year-old Khar Misa has arrived from her village 2 hours' drive away in excruciating pain. Years of experience with late pregnancy complications tell the medical staff attending Khar that they're fighting as much for her survival as for her baby's. This is the only medical centre in Badakhshan capable of providing comprehensive obstetric care for around 180,000 women of childbearing age. And Khar's case is a typical example of a woman out of reach of medical help when complications first surface, who arrives at hospital when it's too late for doctors to do much for her baby. It's important to get it out of the womb as quickly as possible. Khar survives, the baby doesn't. Its tiny, misshapen form, the latest addition to the province's tally of what health experts maintain are entirely preventable deaths. If she hadn't made it to qualified help in time, she too would almost certainly have died from obstructed labour. In their effort to bring new life into this austere province, expectant women face a greater chance of losing their own lives than any other mother on the planet. For every 100,000 babies born alive here, 6,500 of their mothers will die in the process. It's the highest rate of maternal mortality in the world. The figures were last measured 5 years ago, and experts acknowledge they may have gone down slightly since. But they say, wherever the numbers stand, they still speak of huge gaps in healthcare for women, more than 5 years after Afghanistan emerged from so many years of conflict.
Women in Badakhshan are chronically malnourished, and therefore their growth is reduced. So they're small women to start with. They have a small body to give birth to a baby. Secondly, women get married in Afghanistan and in remote, more conservative areas like Badakhshan especially, at very young ages.
Badakhshan is singled out by a string of misfortunes. This is a remote part of Afghanistan, the only one of 34 provinces that the Taliban failed to conquer in their sweep across the country in the 1990s. It's served by few roads and even fewer basic health centres. More than likely, transport to whatever help is available is a donkey. The vast majority of women give birth in their homes. During winter, many parts of the province are cut off for 6 or 7 months. But the reasons for the excessive maternal mortality rate go deeper, into cultural values, which place the welfare of men and boys far above that of women and girls. Dr. Hajira Zia Baharistani is a leading gynecologist. She had high hopes that the country's parlous medical facilities would improve noticeably with the removal of the Taliban. It's not the lack of equipment or even supplies, although they are basic. It's the space. Women who've just delivered recover two to a bed, their babies nestling beside them. Electricity supplies haven't been fully functioning in years, and so midwives and doctors are forced to perform difficult deliveries in semi-darkness.
ما بسیار آرزو داشتم که وقتی که افغانستان آرامی شوه، وقتی که در افغانستان دیگه جنگ نباشه، آرزو داشتم که برای صحت مادرها توجهی بسیار خاص شوه و وفیات مادرها بسیار پایان بیاید، به خاطر که بلندترین وفیات مادرها در جهان افغانستان داره و از بدخشان بیخی یک تراژدی است، یک فاجعه است. و طبیعی است که یک کشور جنگ زده است، 23 سال جنگ تمام زیربنای افغانستان تخریب کرده بود. ترمیم کردن بسیار زیاد یک وقت میخواه و بسیار یک حوصله‌مندی و داشتن یک نیروی کافی با تجربه کاری میخواه.
The recent surge in opium production in Afghanistan and the export of heroin to addicts in the West has been well documented. Less has been seen of rising drug abuse by Afghans. Many people living far from clinical centres still see opium as a medicine for any ailment, for themselves and for their children. Mohammadin offers his 5 children a meagre meal of bread and tea. He looks after them by himself after his wife died hours after giving birth to their 6th child at their home in a mountain village. He says she was 55 years old and was hemorrhaging badly. Instead of taking her to a medical centre, he heeded the advice of neighbours and left it until the morning. Too late. She bled to death. He was forced to give the baby away to another villager, saying he wasn't able to look after it.
نمه قدر تکلیف دارم برای خانمون که سعی میروان میرم یک سیاست از زاره میکنم رشوت میدم سعی میروان یا 20 یا 30 یا 10 سعی میروان ریزاش میکنم میام همون خمیرم میکنه سعی همونجا پختمون میکنم میخواد براش بدر میراست اون دروازه که میداری سعی های ده من ده میگن های ده گشنه شدم نان خیلی بود میدم نبود سعی میروان نم واقع است دیگه گریه است سعی میروان چیزی به مادرش دیگه مشکل خلاص سعی میروان.
During the day, Mohammadin sets his children to light tasks, shifting small stones to build a wall. He can't leave to work in a local flour mill because there's no one to look after the younger ones. His loss reveals the impact that the death of a mother has not just on a family, but on a small community governed by strong belief in family unity.
میگم سعی میروان در اون وقت فوتش هم جگرخون بودی ولی دیگه در کس در قسم نیست. هم کس دیگه مقصد در قصه کسی نیست. ایت راویه ندارم سوی موکسه میروان همی قومی موکسه میروان بگه خیلی همی به سرپرست سوسه میروان بیست که همی کمک برای همی سوی میروان این مقصد تماثر کسی نمیکنه و سوی میروانو مقصد همو قدر تم نمیکنن.
Mohammadin's wife might well have benefited from advice here, at a family planning clinic in Badakhshan's main hospital. The women here are in a tiny minority. The United Nations Children's Fund says 97% of women questioned in a recent survey said they weren't using any form of contraceptive. The average fertility rate in Afghanistan is 7 children, but many women can expect to go through up to 10, perhaps 13 pregnancies during their childbearing years. Although contraception is widely frowned upon, many women are waking up to its obvious advantages, not least because it gives their bodies a chance to recover from childbirth, and fewer children means fewer mouths to feed. There's a faint air of secrecy about this clinic. The function and virtues of condoms are discussed along with the contraceptive pill, but women here prefer other means of birth control, a jab, undetectable by husbands, administered every 3 months. Conservative views on the role and rights of women predate the Taliban and its harsh interpretation of Islamic strictures by centuries, not just decades. Women's rights campaigners say early marriage and control of women as the property of men and families are still prevalent across the country. They say most men perpetuate a patriarchal system, with its roots, they'll argue, in religion as well as cultural tradition.
کانداره بعضی کسان نمونه بیت نفر هم پیدا شده که زنش مرده ولی که به پیش دکتر نیاورده اینا ما با خود چشم خود دیدیم
سر خانم بسیار سختگیری است تا یک اجازه از شوهرش از یک فامیلی وراثتی درست نداشته باشه نمیتونه که به شفاخانه بروه اگر برورم تا مجازات قرار میگیره
فعلا زنا حالتی ندارن که سواد داشته باشن کافی از همون خود برخوردار باشن که بفهمن گپ چی است این شوهرشان توسط اجباری نمیتونن که از خانه اونا براین برای یک مناطقی به حساب کار و مشکلات خود ادامه بدن و در کارهایی که برای خودشان ضرورت است
Many believe the answer to the problems confronting women lies in education, the antidote to inequality, poverty and poor health. In 2001, when the International Master Plan for the Reconstruction of Afghanistan was being designed, education, in particular for girls, was the beacon ambition. Literacy, the theory was, would guarantee future generations of women an active role in the social and economic repair of their country. 4 out of every 5 Afghan women are illiterate. In Badakhshan, where around 2/3 of girls attend primary school, the plan is working well. Across the country, the average is far lower, but still a big stride after the years of the Taliban when girls weren't allowed to go to school. But in the more violent southern and eastern provinces, the policy is under threat. As Taliban insurgents and other deeply conservative forces have strengthened over the past 2 years, many schools have been burned down, female teachers have been killed, and the parents of thousands of children have been terrorized into keeping them at home. Nonetheless, for many investing in the future of Afghanistan's women, education is a project that has to continue. Few would disagree, but some women's rights activists say successes in one development area, like education, mask abundant failures in others that were also deemed important at the time. True, they say, fewer women feel compelled to wear the burqa, signifying a greater sense of freedom to mix in open society. True, many women now have a loud, if precarious, voice in the media, but they alone are no comprehensive measure of progress in women's rights. Scratch the surface, campaigners say, and those most actively supporting women's empowerment would be shocked at what they discover underneath.
The promises that the international community made at the beginning that they are not going to compromise the rights of women, but now we can see that actually the rights of women have been compromised. Women are still suffering from the domestic violence. Women are suffering still from the lack of security. Women are still being kidnapped, raped, and abducted by the illegal armed groups. And women are getting no justice when they are going to the judicial system. So how the situation we can say that it has been changed? The only thing is, for example, I was working before the Taliban regime, and again I'm back to work. This is the only change that you can see in the life of the woman. And that's it.
Just ask Jamila. That's not her real name. She and the safe house in Kabul, which protects her, didn't want to reveal her identity, fearing that the family who've scarred her for life could get to her. Jamila was married off at the age of 12, and in the 4 years since has endured nothing but physical and psychological misery at the hands of a violent husband and a mother-in-law pushing him on.
مامانم قصد که مادرشان خودشان دار از نوناچی میکنه گفته با من قصد دستن و دل خالی کامت داره نکشتم گفته
کی سر تیل خالی کرد؟
خوشیم گفت کامت داره نکشتم گفته داره مزینه نکنم با خودی من گفت زد ایسومی استگوان نگفتم خود تو کشتن خودی من خودم میکشم.
Domestic violence in Afghanistan, like all other kind of violence, is getting worse. I think the phenomenon of domestic violence is global. It doesn't recognize any borders or any level of development. But when it comes to countries which are in conflict and deep poverty, like Afghanistan, then it's one of the top issues.
Jamila's mother forced her into marrying her husband after her elder sister rejected him and ran away. Afghan custom dictates such practice to protect family honour. She suffered burns to her chin, her chest, her hands and part of her legs. They were so severe some of her fingers have welded together. Only extensive plastic surgery with outside help can help her now.
We encourage some of them to reintegrate back to their families and their societies on certain conditions, that the violence should not be happening to them again. But with some of them we find other alternative way of living. If they are a woman and they have some children and they want to live with them, we encourage them. We teach them some skills to make them able to live on their own. But in this society it's impossible for young girls, single girls, to live on their own. So that has been a challenge for us.
For women's rights campaigners, the issue is so taboo, so locked behind closed doors, that nothing gets done. But they say it lies at the heart of the debate on justice and judicial reform, not to mention gender equality, an issue which Horia Mossadegh says the West has chosen quietly to ignore for fear of upsetting the Afghan government.
For me, this is a scream and a voice to the international community to look how much we are suffering in Afghanistan and no one is here to help us. Most of the times, a woman, even if she dares to go to court, she loses. These are all the problems, and I think the governmental institutions and even the cabinet haven't been gender sensitized.
This is one institution which government supporters would argue proves exactly the opposite. Parliament is held up as the big showcase of post-conflict success. More than a quarter of its MPs are women. Most of them voted into office on a quota system designed to give women a greater voice in public affairs. According to the MP, Shukriya Barakzai, these are golden times for women's rights.
Never women in Afghanistan in whole history have had that much voice like today. Never media was tried to inform the people about the women's rights like today. Never government was afraid of women's, which is like today. I'm very happy that women participation in the parliament. It's at least shows that the Afghan women have this capacity and capability to be and participate in political life. And still we are not united in the parliament, but it's a good exercise to change the belief of this society, to show women in power.
Family life, enjoyed here at the Women's Park in Kabul, gives photographer Farzana Wahidi plenty to focus on. She works for an international news agency and photographs her country's struggle for peace, for the enlightenment of those watching from afar, the moments of innocent pleasure that sit side by side with the lingering enmities and violence and daily frustrations.
I'm not happy with all the change that happened in this 5 years. I was expecting more, but it doesn't mean that there is no change, but I want more.
Farzana lived through some, but not all the violence, and like most Afghans, has a deep hope that the next 25 years, even if they're difficult, will be nothing like the previous 25. Afghanistan as it is, with the ruin and the bleak beauty all around, is Farzana's profession and her passion. She's a dedicated chronicler of the birth of a nation, free of mass killing, raping and pillaging, free in the eyes of many of attempts from inside and outside to subjugate the Afghan people. It's a difficult birth, she says, but as the mothers and midwives of Badakhshan will tell her for nothing, there's no such thing as an easy birth in their country.